Welcome those of you who are watching our Unity of Monroe YouTube channel. Whenever you're watching it, thank you for tuning in, and I wish you well. We wish you well, and thank you for being here today on this beautiful Sunday in June, the second Sunday of June. You may have heard before about the story of a young boy who had heard these, shall we call them tall tales in his family, tales of his father, his grandfather, and great-grandfather being able to walk on water. On their 21st birthday, they would walk on water and walk across the lake they lived on, and they would go to the local bar and have their first legal drink, a beer. And so this young boy, 21, he turns 21, he and his buddy get in a rowboat, and they go out to the middle of the lake. He says, I'm going to do the same thing my father, my grandfather, and great-grandfather did. I'm going to walk on water. So he steps up on the boat, walks out, and immediately sinks into the water. Almost drowns. His buddy pulls him out. And finally he gets to shore and he goes to his grandmother and says, Grandma, how come I couldn't walk on water? My dad, my grandfather, and great-grandfather all did it. I couldn't do it. And she looks at him and she says, You dummy. They were born in January. You were born in July. Figure it out. Now, I've told the story before of being able to walk on the Ohio River, which I did do and walked about halfway out. Of course, it was January of 77, which was the coldest it was around here, probably back in those days. I don't know what the record was. But when we got to about the middle, and we started hearing a little bit of cracking, I was like, back to the other side. So sure enough, so that's not really a miracle, is it? Walking on frozen water. But when you think about, every day, there are miraculous things happening. We sometimes don't see them, or we don't observe them, or we don't feel it. But you think, every single day, miracle things are happening. Those flying machines in the air. 150 years ago, nobody thought, or very few people thought that, we could fly in the air. Oh, wow. Think about the latest in medical advances. Oh, my goodness. And you think, how did that happen? How did it come about? Think about your computer, your phone, the internet, all of those things, 100 or so years ago, 50 years ago for some of them. They were thought, that can't happen. That cannot happen. And yet, these are some of the far out ideas we say, they're just everyday things. But they're miracles when you get right down to them. One of the most visionary souls throughout the last 1,000+ years was Leonardo da Vinci. And I read a book by Walter Isaacson on his life, a fascinating, wonderful, epic book about his life. And he was such a visionary soul. He was known, of course, mostly by, from his painting and from his artwork, but he had such scientific and technological ways of life that he mapped these things out, and now they're coming true. And we look at that and we say, how did he know that? He was a visionary. He knew that there's an infinite possibilities when we hold our consciousness up high, our heart, our faith, and we see things from the miraculous and instead of just the ordinary kind of way we look at things. So what really started out as something that was small, maybe something that he sketched out, has now become true or now become actual manifestation. But I've said this before about miracles. I think one of the things we have to be aware of, and you take this with a grain of salt, there's really no such thing as a miracle. Let me say that again. There's really no such thing as a miracle as we define, or as most folks would define a miracle. As most folks would define a miracle, there's no such thing as that. Because that's that kind of divine miracle where God supplies something to someone or some part of the world, but excludes another part of the world. So when we look at what Charles Fillmore, Unity's co-founder, said, he said, in reality, miracles are events that take place as a result of the operation of a higher unknown law. And all true action is governed by law. Nothing just happens and can be explained under the law of cause and effect. So whatever we put out, whatever happens, and as we are in allegiance with, or in alignment with, would be a better way of saying it, divine mind, we see those miraculous things happening in our life, in our experiences. A miracle one day was something that years ago we would never have thought of, never had crossed our mind. But when we think in this day and age, most people would claim and say a miracle is something that's supernatural. Yet that's not what Fillmore is saying. He's saying we understand it to the best of our ability. It may be something we don't quite understand yet, but it's still part of the divine law, still governed by law, because all of the world, the cosmos, the universe, everything is governed by law, friends. Everything is governed by law. So when we think, in terms of something supernatural, that God bestowed favor upon this person, and it was a miracle, what does it say about this person over here? I share this with you because we've been experiencing some real bad weather, especially in the Midwest here. I was watching a video of a part of northern central Indiana that I'm very familiar with that had a tornado come through, and the devastation and all of that. And you see those reports on the news, and they'll interview somebody whose house or farm or community was spared. And yet, the next neighborhood over, the next farm over, it's like devastation. Lives lost, unfortunately. Farms lost. Homes, communities, neighborhoods. Now, why did God favor that person, that neighborhood, that farm, and not the one down the road? Now, I say that because most of us, if we were in that situation, I guarantee you, we'd probably say, it's a miracle. Nothing wrong with that. That's true. I think it is true to some degree. But we kind of miss the point. I think we miss the point when we say, oh, it's a miracle that this person was saved. But where is God over here? Was that person's prayers or pleas not strong enough? That's a God of caprice. That's a God of just giving favors over here because of whatever. And that's not a God I think I really want to understand or worship or follow when it comes right down to it. Because what it's saying is that, like say for instance in a plane crash, 299 people pass away or killed in a plane crash, but one person survives. Would that person call it a miracle? They possibly would. Yes, they would. We understand that. But there's more to it than just somehow God favors one soul and 299 didn't have enough what? That's not a God that I believe in. Never has been. Even when I was a kid, I couldn't understand that. I could not understand a God of such a limited concept, a caprice God, shall we say, that just says, oh, I'm going to favor these souls over these. Because they didn't do what? So when we get right down to what it means to have a miracle consciousness, a miracle mindset, what Fillmore is saying and what others are saying is that we elevate our consciousness so that we are in alignment with the reception or receiving God's grace, God's goodness. It's not a matter of waiting for some sort of miracle, crying out into the darkness and saying, oh, if only a miracle could happen. Because that's putting what? God out here. That's saying that somehow God will favor us in some way, shape, or form. And sometimes we get fixated not on the miracle consciousness within, the power of God within, but we get fixated on our frustrations, which that's understandable. We all go through frustrations from time to time. I don't know a person who hasn't felt that kind of tug and pull of whatever frustrates one's soul. But all too often we pray from a consciousness that's God is separate from us. A miracle is separate from us. And only if we prayed enough only if we did the right things, wished in the right way. But as I began this lesson, it was with the idea and the intent in mind that miracles are all around us. It's in everything we think, say, and do. It's in us, each individual soul. Author Gabrielle Bernstein writes in her book, The Universe Has Your Back, the only reason you're not aware of the nonstop stream of blessings and miracles is because you look in the wrong places, right? We look sometimes in the wrong places, the wrong spaces. Maybe we're looking with our eyes closed, our mind closed. Maybe we've got our head down. I've been known to do that, right? Walking with my head down and I bump into something. And so we're walking with our head down or we're fixated on something. She goes on to say, with just a little willingness and awareness, it's amazing what can happen to have a miracle mindset, a miracle consciousness, and an awareness. Speaking of, as I was earlier, about walking on water, mine wasn't such a miracle, but we know the story of Jesus walking on the water, right? That story of walking out to greet, shall we say, the disciples. And I always say, those disciples were such great examples of, how shall we say this, Donna, of thick minds. Sometimes they didn't grasp the intent of what Jesus was trying to teach them. And so Jesus walks out on the water shortly before dawn, walking on the lake, and the disciples saw him on the lake. They were terrified. It's a ghost. They were afraid. And they said, and they cried out in fear. So there, right then and there, we have what? Not faith in the capacity of a consciousness that can do miraculous things, but faith in fear. And so Peter, who is the disciple who represents what power, Carol? Faith. Peter represents faith. But faith in what? Now, you and I can have faith in the power of God within us. We can have faith in our strength, our perseverance, our peacefulness, our love. But we can also have faith in our fear. I'm afraid this is going to happen. I have a lot of faith in that fear of whatever is going to happen. Somebody says, you should be more positive in your faith. Well, I'm positive that this is going to happen, whatever it is. So it's still faith, but we misplace our faith. Like Peter did, he misplaced his faith. What did he do? He tried to walk on water, like the story of the young boy, and he turned 21. I don't think Peter was looking for a beer, but So he walks on water, tries to do it, and immediately he sinks, and Jesus reaches down, catches him, and he says, you have little faith, why did you doubt? Why did you doubt? So, again, the power of our misplaced faith. We do it all the time, unfortunately, because sometimes we look at things and we say, oh, that couldn't be possible. Yet life is a miracle. All things are possible. If we can have that faith that invigorates us, that lifts our soul, that lifts us up. And so in this case, Jesus is inviting Peter to find that depth of his faith, of his soul, of finding the Christ consciousness and awareness that will lift him up, a miracle to be understood in that way of looking at things. And it begins by letting ourselves find the divinity within, the divine within us. And it's very natural to look at things and say, oh, this can't happen. And yet a quickened faith turns that around and says, with life, with God, all things are possible. Whatever is coming forth, there's always the possibility of the divine. There's always an agreement in mind to set our focus and attention on. As it said in the Daily Word today, right, Jan? That which you appreciate appreciates. It grows. It matures. So one miracle mindset I think it's important to remember for us. A miracle mindset, is there another possibility? And then we turn that around And we affirm and know and declare there is another possibility. Why? Because there always is, friends. There's a miracle in you right now in your thoughts and in your heart. There's a miracle in nature. There's a miracle that the Reds won the other night. Did I say that? That's terrible of me, I tell you. But is there another possibility? Yes, because all things are possible. Not because God favors, say, just Carl over just Lynn. Sorry about that, guys. Not that God favors just Lynn over just Carl. You see what I'm saying with that? God is just the power, the presence, and the fullness of life itself. God is the consciousness and mind. And so for God to seek favor, or to show favor one over the other, that's a pretty dim, weak concept of spirit, in my opinion. But to me, when we are in the flow of God, in that faith that lifts things up, in that faith that knows there's all kinds of possibilities, we can affirm and say, there is another possibility when I'm looking at this thing in my life. There is another possibility. All things are possible. To be in that flow of the divine. The next miracle mindset that I want you to think about, is this going to be easy and orderly? And then we turn that around and say, this is going to be easy and orderly. In contrast to, if you will, looking at it saying, oh, this is going to be so hard. This is going to be so tough. There's a 4-letter word, hard, that I think we could probably take away from our vocabulary. You know what I mean with that? Throw it away. It's an obscene word because we say, oh, I have to do this, 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 and this. It's going to be hard. It could be challenging, yes, but it's not going to be hard. You see, we set ourselves up. Oh, it's going to be hard. Oh, so we have to struggle. It's going to be difficult, maybe. It's going to be challenging, perhaps. It's going to be hard. We set ourselves up for that particular thing. The miracle really is that shift in perception, saying it's going to be easy and orderly. To affirm that and to know that there is order in the universe. And to be open to the experience of that from whatever consciousness we have, whatever awareness we have, to realize that, yes, that miracle mindset is affirming and knowing that there is power and the presence of God that flows through us and we are in connection with it. So the third miracle mindset I want you to consider today is this. I am. I am connected to everything. Versus, I am so alone. I'm connected in this space and place. You are connected at home as you are watching this. We are all connected with the Spirit, Spirit mind, God mind. We're all connected and have that essence of what God is moving through us as we open up the channels and allow that flow of God mind to bless us, to entertain and move us, if you get what I'm saying with that. So that last miracle mindset is affirming and knowing I am not alone. I am one with God and the universe and all of creation. One of my favorite kind of definitions of a miracle is simply this. This is a Gregism. I don't know if it's a Gregism, but it's one of mine. A miracle is a shift in my perception that removes any blocks to my awareness of the presence of God. Where? Right here, right now. That's faith lifted up. That's faith that sees the possibilities no matter where I am, stagnant, stuck, ready to take that first step off the boat. Faith will lift me up. And I don't recommend you go out on the boat today in the middle of June and take a walk. But you know what I mean by that. Faith in those stories that we had from the Bible, in the New Testament, those were stories that represent and signify something very powerful in our lives, the possibility of having a miracle mindset. So wherever we are, whatever we're going through. Miracles happen. My friends, look around you. Look at the people in your life. Look at yourself. Look at the heavens, the universe. Look at nature. Look at the birth of a young baby, a baby born into this world. Even look at the transition of life into another form. All of this is miraculous. All of life is a miracle. And so, as Einstein said, we can look at life from one way or another, as if nothing were miraculous or that all of life is a miracle. So when you wake up tomorrow morning, maybe consider these three things, these three possibilities of having that shift in consciousness. That a miracle shift is the perception that removes any blocks to the awareness. And have that concept in mind that today is a miracle day, and ready to see whatever the blessing may be, the miracles that are at hand when we establish and live from a miracle mindset. So let's do some of that right now, my friends, to just sit back and pause for a few moments to invite ourselves into that consciousness and awareness of a miracle mindset, for it is always there. It is always ready. It is always willing and able. And now as we close our eyes, we might ask ourselves, the question simply is, am I ready? Am I set? Am I willing to entertain this miracle mindset? So invite yourself to sit back and relax right now, just to pause in this moment and getting comfortable in the chair that supports you. Just focus the attention upon the power of your breath as you breathe in and as you let that go and breathe out. And as I do so, I know that I am able to focus and have purpose in this miracle moment of observation and awareness, this miracle moment of love and kindness, and all the things that go into seeing the divine in all of creation. I am focused and my attention is placed right there in the affirmation that life is a miraculous event. Life has been and will be a series of miracles, one after the other. And I place my attention upon that calming, assuring power of faith. Faith that knows the infinite. A faith that revels in the possibilities. The faith that sees the blessings, even in the midst of whatever the struggle may be defined as. I affirm and claim this day that I live in a miracle mindset, no longer afraid or struggling, but living from a consciousness, and in that consciousness of miraculous possibilities. I invite myself in this moment to breathe in once again and to just let go of that concern, doubt, or worry or fear. And now I can breathe easily and peacefully into that flow of the divine. For in that connection of faith that is grounded in oneness and purpose, in that flow, I divine the answers. I see more of the glory and the wonder of what life is. And loving presence, it's not a matter of observing or seeing myself separate from that glory, that grace, but knowing that all are part of the miracle of life, the wonder of life itself. I am in the flow and the glow of how Spirit moves through me and as me and in me as it does in all. And divine answers and ideas are activated and quickened. As I awaken each and every day, may I hold and behold this miracle mindset consciousness. To awaken, to breathe, to live is just in and of itself a miracle. And so I take that on. I affirm that good. I claim that faith-filled power. And now I take a moment to listen in the stillness and in the quiet as my faith faculty is enhanced and quickened, where I move beyond that first step and move into the very enlightened steps of what true faith is all about. Oneness with all of creation and oneness with God in the silence. in oneness with all life. My soul, my faculty of faith is quickened, is lifted up this day and emboldened to see the world in miraculous terms. And so I say thank you, God, for the divine law working in and through each and every miraculous event. I hold and behold a power of faith that moves through and understands and asks and knows that more and more is being revealed each day. And so it is. And thank you, loving presence, for the quickening power of faith in mind and heart. So be it. Amen.